Getting up into the sky? That was the easy part. For this plane, the real terror began in the final seconds before touchdown. The U-2, it flew where enemy fighters could not follow. It photographed the world from 70,000 feet. But in the final 2 feet before the runway, one of America's greatest aircraft still needs a man in a Ford Mustang shouting numbers over the radio. Because for the U-2, landing was never the easy part. Every landing becomes a controlled near crash. A fast car races behind the airplane, and inside that car, another U-2 pilot watches the wheels, the wings, and the runway. Then reads out the height over the radio. 10 feet, 8, 6, hold it! One of America's greatest spy planes can look down on the world from the edge of space. But in the final few feet, it still needs a human voice from a speeding car to bring it back to Earth. The reason starts with the wings. The U-2's wings stretch about 105 feet across. Long, narrow, and fragile looking, they belong less to a warplane than to a sailplane in a classified military program. Its glide ratio is roughly 23-1. For every meter of altitude it loses, it can slide 23 meters forward. Cut the power, and the aircraft keeps going. In the high air, that is a wonderful thing. On landing, it becomes a nightmare. A normal airplane wants to land when the pilot brings it down properly. The U-2 negotiates. Those huge wings that let it glide beautifully at altitude become a problem close to the runway. Near the ground, air trapped between the wing and the surface increases lift and reduces drag. Ground effect. Many aircraft feel it. The U-2 practically moves in and signs a lease. Just above the runway, the aircraft wants to float. It has spent the whole flight proving how little altitude it needs to keep flying. And now, the pilot has to persuade it to stop. The landing gear does not help. Instead of a normal 3-wheel arrangement, the U-2 has bicycle landing gear. 2 main wheels in line along the fuselage. Small outrigger wheels, called pogos, support the wings during taxi and takeoff. But after liftoff, they fall away. When the U-2 comes back, it lands on 2 wheels arranged like a bicycle. A very expensive bicycle with 105-foot wings. Touchdown slightly wrong, and one wing can dip. The aircraft can wobble, scrape, or drift toward an expensive lesson. The controls demand muscle too. At low altitude and low speed, the pilot works the airplane with real pressure. After hours in a pressure suit, the most delicate part arrives when he is tired, stiff, and looking through a cockpit with a poor runway view. The pilot cannot simply plant the aircraft onto the runway. Drop it from too high, and damage becomes possible. Mishandle the flare, and it can hit hard, bounce, or scrape. The target is almost comically small. Hold the Dragon Lady a couple of feet above the runway, bleed away the final lift, and let it quit flying at exactly the right moment. Around 2 feet, about 60 centimeters. A few feet matter. 1 foot matters. The pilot needs eyes outside the airplane. And because the airplane is moving, those eyes need wheels. So the Air Force found a solution that sounds like it was invented after too much coffee. Put another U-2 pilot in a fast car. Send him racing down the runway behind the airplane. Let him talk the pilot back to Earth. The chase car driver is not a random ground crewman with enthusiasm. He is usually another qualified U-2 pilot who knows those final seconds. He knows what the pilot can see, what he cannot see, and how quickly a harmless-looking float can become a hard arrival. As the U-2 descends, the chase car accelerates behind it, sometimes above 100 miles per hour. The driver watches the wheels, the wing, the sink rate, and the attitude. Then he calls out height over the radio. 10 feet, 8, 6, 4, 2. Those calls become the pilot's missing depth perception. The man in the car is not giving color commentary. He is lending the pilot his eyes. Over the decades, the cars changed into a strange little museum of American horsepower. Ford Country Squire wagons, Chevrolet El Caminos, Mustangs, Camaros, Pontiac GTOs, and Dodge Chargers. A classified Cold War spy plane being talked home by muscle cars with radios. Somewhere in that image, American engineering becomes almost too American. But the landing does not end when the wheels touch. Because the U-2 rests on bicycle gear, one wing eventually drops toward the runway as speed bleeds away. The wingtip comes down and scrapes along the concrete. The aircraft is built for this indignity. Titanium skids protect the tips when they touch the runway. Imagine designing an aircraft to fly above 70,000 feet, then accepting that one of its wings will drag on the ground at the end. After the aircraft stops, crews reinstall the pogo wheels so it can taxi normally. Only then does the Dragon Lady look less like a balancing act and more like a machine again. So here's the question. Would you rather be the pilot trying to land the U-2 or the one in the chase car talking him down? To understand why anyone built such a difficult airplane, go back to 1955. America had a problem it could not bomb, buy, or ignore. It needed to see inside the Soviet Union. Airfields, missile sites, nuclear facilities, secrets big enough to change the future of the Cold War. But the Soviet Union was too vast to watch from the border, and too dangerous to fly over in anything ordinary. A normal reconnaissance aircraft would have been chased, tracked, or shot down. Lockheed's Skunk Works, led by Kelly Johnson, looked for a loophole in the sky. If a spy plane could fly higher than Soviet fighters and higher than Soviet missiles, it might pass over enemy territory, take pictures, and come home before anyone could reach it. The target was almost absurd for the mid-1950s, above 70,000 feet. Most aircraft were built to fight the air. The U-2 was built to use as little of it as possible. The warning came before the U-2 was even cleared to fly. During a high-speed taxi test in 1955, the pilot only intended to run along the runway with no intention of taking off. But at about 70 knots, the wings decided for him. The aircraft lifted itself off the ground. For most aircraft, that would be a serious warning. For the U-2, it revealed the whole design. The wings were so efficient that the airplane wanted to fly almost too easily. Everything had been sacrificed for altitude. Make it light. Give it enormous wings. Carry cameras, fuel, and one pilot. Comfort did not matter. Easy handling did not matter. Forgiving mistakes did not matter. The result could fly where other aircraft struggled to breathe. But the same design that made the U-2 brilliant up high created its worst habit down low. It did not want to come down. Above 70,000 feet, the U-2 entered a part of the atmosphere where flying started to feel less like aviation and more like trespassing. The sky darkened. Pilots could see the curve of the earth. Stars could appear while the sun was still up. The world below turned into borders, rivers, airfields, and weather systems. The aircraft could cruise there for hours if the pilot respected it. Small movements mattered. A careless input could take thousands of feet to fix. The pilot sat alone in a pressure suit, breathing oxygen before takeoff to reduce the risk of decompression sickness. At that altitude, if pressure failed, the body could not simply tough it out. In very low pressure, fluids can begin to boil. Consciousness can disappear fast. Then came one of the narrowest traps in the U-2's world. Every airplane has a stall speed. Fly too slowly and the wings stop making enough lift. Every airplane also has a maximum safe speed. Fly too fast and air loads can damage the structure. At normal altitude, those numbers are far apart. Near the top of the U-2's envelope, they squeeze together. Sometimes the aircraft had only a handful of knots between too slow and too fast. A little slower and the wing could stall. A little faster and the aircraft could overspeed. The safe zone became less like a highway lane and more like balancing on a curb. Even the fuel had to be special because the Dragon Lady could not simply drink what everyone else drank. Up there, the U-2 lived in a world where almost everything was trying to kill the pilot. Thin air, freezing cold, pressure loss, and a speed window only a few knots wide. But the hardest part was still waiting below. After hours near the edge of space, the pilot had to bring the Dragon Lady back to Earth. The U-2 did not remain famous because it was hard to land. It remained famous because it kept appearing when history was holding its breath. In 1960, Francis Gary Powers flew a U-2 over the Soviet Union. The mission was supposed to happen beyond reach. Soviet air defenses reached it anyway. A missile brought the aircraft down. Powers survived, was captured, and the secret airplane became impossible to keep secret. Washington first tried to explain it as a weather research aircraft. Moscow had the pilot, the wreckage, and the proof. The spy plane built to avoid headlines suddenly created one of the biggest diplomatic crises of the Cold War. 2 years later, another U-2 helped reveal something even more dangerous. In October 1962, U-2 photographs showed Soviet missile sites under construction in Cuba. Not rumors, not guesses, pictures. The evidence reached President John F. Kennedy at a moment when one wrong move could have pushed the United States and the Soviet Union into nuclear war. The Cuban Missile Crisis did not begin with a dogfight, a bombing raid, or a missile launch. It began with images taken by a high-flying aircraft looking down through thin air. The U-2 did not fire a shot. It did not need to. Sometimes a photograph is enough to move fleets, armies, presidents, and the entire world. The strange part is how long the aircraft lasted after that. Satellites arrived, drones arrived, new platforms seemed ready to push the Dragon Lady into a museum. Then the U-2 stayed. A satellite passes when orbit allows. A U-2 can be tasked, launched, redirected, upgraded, and packed with sensors. Its long wings carry heavy payloads high above weather. Its old design keeps accepting new electronics, like an old house with suspiciously modern wiring. Replacing it has been harder than expected. Even its supposed unmanned successor could not fully escape the joke. The RQ-4 Global Hawk, often discussed in the same high-altitude surveillance world, also became known for needing chase support during landing. The pilot was gone from the cockpit, but the runway still wanted supervision. The U-2 survived in an awkward category, old enough to look outdated, useful enough to remain dangerous, and specialized enough that nothing quite copied it.